it is really hard to find something that fits exactly. And that is why welding clasps onto chains is a very good skill to have, because I assure you the demand out there is going to grow exponentially for bespoke, for custom tailored lengths. Hi, welcome back. Many of you already know that I've been a jeweler wholesaler for many, many years. I'm a silversmith, and I've been making bracelets and necklaces with clasp for many, many years before permanent jewelry. And although I really enjoy permanent jewelry and the convenience of it, I can understand, and I still own many pieces that have clasp so that I can change and add on jewelry pieces to go with my clothing. Now, many people, because of their job, they have to remove all jewelry before they begin, or if you're into varsity sports, you cannot have any jewelry for safety reasons. So they also want a clasp. As well, you'll find that many people now, they still want the clasp, again, for those reasons, or they could be traditionalists and they want the clasp, but the things that are available on the market over the counter in jewelry stores have a long extension chain, or and certainly you would have to use that if you were bigger boned or you're an athlete. Whereas if you were petite and you didn't like the extension chain, you could just cut it off. Whereas for the rest of us, if you wanted something that was custom, especially when it is fine, dainty, it is really hard to find something that fits exactly. And that is why welding clasps onto chains is a very good skill to have, because I assure you the demand out there is going to grow exponentially for bespoke, for custom tailored lengths that everyone can use, including athletes, nurses, daycare workers, people who must have their jewelry removed before the shift begins. So I hope you find this video useful, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. These are all permanent bracelets, but say if I wanted to add one, not always, and I want it to be on a clasp. So today, this is what I'm going to explain, how to we're going to do these 4 bracelets, these chains, into clasp bracelets. And I'm going to show you how to do it, what you need to consider. The clasp, the chain size, and the size of jump rings that you should consider. For those of you who are not familiar with clasps, you want to buy ones that are machine made, because there are mechanisms inside, a spring-loaded mechanism that you want very, very strong. So you don't want things to be handmade, because they don't, sometimes you'll find, and I've done that when I first started out in business, it was cheaper out of India. Problem was that they didn't spring back. And these gold-filled, these are made in Italy. All of these clasps, these are sterling. So I'll explain that. This is a spring ring clasp. They are circular, almost the size of a spring. They're very fine. They're perfect for thin chains. These are pear-shaped lobster clasps. So they look like lobster clasp, and they're pear-shaped. The clearance here is bigger. These are rectangular lobster clasps, and they come also in a plethora sizes, and they tend to be more square-ish, boxier. The clearance isn't as big as this in relation to the size of the clasp. And then of course you have jump rings, and the jump rings that you use to close the end are not necessarily the same size that you use to weld your permanent bracelets. So those are clasps, these are the chains. So we're going to try doing this right now. First thing to consider when deciding on the type of clasp is size balance. You don't want a very heavy clasp on a chain, even though a bigger one is easier to open, and a small one you have to use your nail fingertip like this. Aside from the visual balance, problem with a heavy clasp is when you're working, it'll always fall this way to the bottom, and or if you're walking, sometimes it might fling to the front. So you want it as light as possible and as visually balanced as possible. That is the first thing to consider. The second thing to consider is the size and clearance. See, this lobster clasp, the clearance is very narrow. There isn't a whole lot. It would never work even if you wanted to close a thick jump ring or chain. Okay, so you would have to use something like this, or I do have a thicker version of this. So there are different sizes that all of these come in, and you just need to make sure that the clearance will go through that. The next thing that you have to keep in mind is the length. While your permanent jewelry, you can get it as tight as possible with very little slack, but in putting on a bracelet, you'd have to be able to have a bit of clearance to maneuver, let go, and then for it to go relax. So in fact, I have found that while my bracelet, finished bracelet that's permanent, is 6 1/4, this has to be, including the clasp, 6 1/2, so that you have a little bit more give. Okay, I'm gonna first start with this Marquise Bar Chain, and I think that this would suit the size. Now, some clasps you'll find the ring is soldered closed. In that case, either you cut it open or you simply add a jump ring to it and then weld that. And usually, if it is cut open, it should be on the side. That way when you're pulling, you're not pulling on the open edge. Most manufacturers of clasps would have them open on the side. And let me see. And so is this one. So now I can clasp on like this, but I don't think I really want that because I want this part to be flat. And so happens the ring, I would prefer to add a jump ring to it. Okay. So I'm gonna close this like that. And then I'm gonna add a jump ring and see if I like it. Now, should it be the case that you weren't gonna do this, you just want to open the ring and then clasp onto, from the ring of the clasp onto the chain, you can do that and then just weld that. In this case, I'm adding two things, so I'm gonna weld both of these a little later after I have measured the length that I want. So the best thing to do always, if possible, is to mock it up. And I think in this case, I don't want that. I want it one less. So I know this is the one I want for sure. And then I'm going to just cut it. Here, there's a ring. I could just open it, release that, and add the jump ring, or I can just cut it. That means I can reuse this or I can cut it. I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut it because I want to add, let me see, I want to add this ring to the end so that it's easier and bigger. This is a 4 mm jump ring and those are 3 mm. I just wanted to make it easier. And so this is what it's gonna look like. And then usually I would say, if you have a customer there, have them try it on and see if they like it. I like this because I actually want one more bracelet that can fall down if I want a little bit lower, so that I have a plethora, a range. So having a clasp back is very nice as well. So, okay, now we are ready to weld. I have made sure that the jump ring is closed. I'm welding with the grounded pliers. And then I'm going to look through the screen. I'm welding at 7 watts. I've taken it out. This is what it looks like. And then I'm going to check. It's excellent. That did it. And I'm finding that 7.5 or 7 watts to 8 watts works well with 22 gauge as well as 24. So it's just a matter of preference and getting to the right. Here you go. I've got that side. Okay. And that worked too. I'm finding that seriously with these pliers, the grounded pliers, they're so much easier. Just less cumbersome, and I can see where the cut mark is. That. Okay. So now you have finished bracelet that is with a clasp, and it is adjustable for those who want to be able to add or take off from your collection. Next up, this is one of my favorite chains, this thicker paper clip that's in sterling silver. So here, although this would work, so would this one. I think I like this the most. It mirrors the shape and it's a little bit more androgynous. So then we have to decide, okay, will this ring work? I want it fairly inconspicuous, or do I need a bigger ring? I think I'm going to go with a smaller ring. There you go. So that's what it's going to end up looking like. I think that looks really nice. Now, the good thing about this clasp and this link, it's rather wide and I can link it anywhere I want. So it pays to have it slightly longer than shorter should it be the case I change my mind later. Okay. Yes, I'm looking for something slightly longer for my collection to add. So I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to cut it. But if you're doing it for a customer, leave an extra link or so and see it just in case they want change their minds. So this is quite long, but it works out. And I'm going to weld this. Now here, because this here, I can link onto it. I don't need it to add a jump ring. If you want to add a jump ring, you can do that. Likewise, this link could have fit into that right there. And actually, I might show you how to do that. I was going to weld the jump ring, but I think I'm going to do is show you how to cut the chain and re-weld it. Okay, here, I'm gonna show you. So, although this is very easy to cut on this edge, it will show up. Because naturally you pull, it's gonna be like that. But if you cut on this edge, when it's pulling, it's hidden inside either the clasp, or when you're pulling, the other link will hide it. So what you need to do is, this is a flush side and that's a bevel side. Okay, that's the thing about flush cutters. You cut here so that this side is flush and the other side is beveled. I think you can see it. You'll see that this side is flush. You see that side? It's pointy. And now what you do next is you go this way and you cut it. You don't need to trim a lot. Here you go. Both sides are flush. And what you do is you open this, pivot like that. Try not to go this way, because when you pivot like that, it's much easier to slide back in. So I do this. And I carefully make sure that both sides are touching. You might have to pivot back and forth like that. I'm going to pivot and I can hear it grinding. You see, now you can't really tell where the seam, it's not that it's gotten shorter. Here's a link to compare. It hasn't changed the size all that much. A little bit, but not much. Okay, and make sure I flatten it and I make sure I'm happy with it. Okay, now I'm gonna weld this. I'm gonna check it. Now, I'm not sure if you can see. It's somewhat crookedy. Don't worry about it, because you can mold it, you can change the shape. You just want to make sure that it is perfectly welded and secure. Okay, so I've welded this, but I kind of melted it a little bit, and that's okay. The reason is, now, once you have it in this way, you won't see it. However, what you can also do with these round links is use round nose pair of pliers. You tap, 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 like this. Next thing you know, you've got them formed to the circular size of your pliers. You can smoothen it out like that, and there you have that. All done. And when you clasp on, looks like this. So I have this Dapped coin chain, and I think I want to just weld the clasp right onto the chain. So I'm going to open this like this. And we'll close this end. I'm going to weld right onto the clasp. And now I'm going to see where I want. I haven't figured out where exactly I want the chain. Let's see, my other bracelets would be here. Actually, I quite like that. And I might add a drop to the bottom and have it like that with a drop. So I changed my mind. I'm going to leave the full length and I'm going to add a drop. So now I am going to directly weld the clasp, the seam right here with the clasp. I'm going to hold on to it like this. Okay. So now I just clasp to this link, or anywhere else. I'm going to add a drop a little later, but there is your clasp, and it's very strong. Okay, for the last bracelet, this was a length for a permanent bracelet. He's more athletic, and 7.5 inches. I'm just not going to cut it because I think this will work very well for him. People who are more athletic, they tend to have thicker wrists, and I've chosen this clasp. It could be clasped at the end and somewhere there as well. So should it be the case that he wants it to be shortened, I can cut it after he's tried it, but this is what I'm going to do. And I don't think I'm going to have a ring at the end. I could, but I'm not going to. Okay, so with this, I have available 20 gauge, and this one is 22 gauge, but I'm gonna see whether or not it looks balanced with a 22 gauge jump ring. And it's 4 mm. I think it looks good. So excellent. So I'm going to weld that. Okay, now I'm going to weld the seam of this. It's 20 gauge. It's a little bit thicker, and it's going to work very well like this. And you can use, I prefer 22 gauge, so you can use 22 gauge, not noticeable in the difference. But let's do this. Okay, my seam is so good that I can't seem to find it. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Now, the other thing is, if you've done a jump ring like this, you've welded it, and there is a weld mark, a dot, that you don't like, what you can actually do is make sure that the weld is where the clasp is, hidden in the clasp, and then press on it slightly so that it's an oval. Because what's going to happen is naturally when it pulls, it'll pull on either this side, the sides like this of the oval. So if your weld is here and it used to be circular, you pushed it down like this will naturally be hidden in the clasp. So even if yours are not perfect, you can't see it, it's not noticeable. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm a wholesaler of premium quality chains and findings, as well as clasps and everything you see in most of my videos. I'm going to leave some more information about our company below, as well as the Orion Micro Welder that I've used.